In today's lecture, we're going to focus a little bit more on the spinal cord, and we're going to talk a little bit about how does the spinal cord actually communicate with the body, and then also we're going to talk about a really important job of the spinal cord, and that is reflexes, which we probably don't think about because we can't control them, but our reflexes are really important for allowing us to interact with our environment and keep us safe. So let's get started. So what we're going to talk about first are these things called nerve tracts, right? And a tract is just a pathway. And what ends up happening is your brain lives up here, right? Your brain lives in your cranium. But in order for your brain to communicate with your body, it needs to travel down and up the spinal cord. So if you take a look here at my brain model, I've cut in half. You can see this is a brain. This is what's called the brain stem. We're going to talk all about this. And this is the beginning of the spinal cord. So the one thing I want you really to notice here is that these are interconnected. They are not separate entities. The spinal cord is a continuation off of the brain. And what ends up happening is these neurons, these long axons, go down the spinal cord and travel out to the body and back up again. And those are called nerve tracts. And there's really two types of nerve tracts. There's nerve tracts which send information down to the body, and there's tracts that send information back up to the brain. And that's going to be in what is called the white matter. Those are in the funiculi of the spinal cord. So if you think back to the image of the spinal cord, there's the gray matter in the middle, that butterfly, and then on the outside we have our funiculi. Think of the funiculi as the elevators going up, and then think of the gray matter as when you get off the floor, you can go out each direction. So the white matter is made up of these long axons traveling up and down the spinal cord. And they provide that two-way communication between the brain and the body. And there's two types. The first type is called ascending. To ascend means to go up, right? So if I say I ascended the stairs, I went up the stairs. So ascending fibers are going to be your sensory neurons going up to the brain. So for example, if I step on a tack, it's going to send a pain receptor response up to my spinal cord, and then up my spinal cord, up to my brain, where that pain is going to be processed by my brain. Now, here's something that's very interesting. One of the things I've mentioned many times in this class is that form and function go hand in hand, right? There's a reason for everything. Well, this is one of those instances where we don't really know why something happens, and that is the fact that our fibers cross over. So what do I mean by that? Well, one thing I hope you know, and if you don't know, we'll be talking about it, is the right side of your brain controls the left side of your body, and the left side of your brain controls the right side of your body. So for example, if I touch something hot with my right hand, that's actually being interpreted by the left side of my brain, and if I want to move my left hand, the right side of my brain actually makes that happen. And that's why when people have a stroke and it affects one side of their brain, they can be paralyzed on one side and not the other. So what ends up happening here, which is very strange, and the reason why this happens is because these neurons, these fibers, they cross over to the other side at the medulla oblongata. So where's the medulla oblongata? Well, if you look at my little brain model right here, the bottom part of the brainstem, this is the medulla oblongata right here. It's right at the beginning of the spinal cord and the end of the brainstem. So at this point, the neurons on, let's say, the left side of the body, they travel up the left side of the spinal cord, and then when they get over to the medulla oblongata, which is right here, they cross over and go up the other side. We still don't have a good reason for it. It doesn't seem to give us any advantage to have the left side of our body controlled by the right side of our brain. It happens during development. It's not just us. It happens in other organisms as well. There's a lot of theories on it, but there's really no strong evidence to support a reason for it. But one thing that's also very strange is they don't all cross over. Almost all of them cross over, but some of those neurons stay on the same side. So it's interesting. We don't know why, but it is what it is kind of a thing. Our fibers, as they travel up, they cross over at the medulla oblongata to the other side, except some of them don't. Don't know why. The second type are, if you probably figured out, are called descending fibers. And these are going to be our motor fibers that carry impulses down to our muscles. So, for example, I touch something hot with my left hand. That sends a message up the left side of my spinal cord to my medulla oblongata. It crosses over to the right side of my body. My brain interprets that as pain. Hey, move your hand, dummy. So the right side of my brain, the motor cortex, sends fibers descending down my spinal cord. They also cross over at the medulla. So again, the right side is going to cross over to the left side, travel down to my muscles to make my hand move. So all of this happens, but again, you can see in this image, you can see it pretty good, right? We have our descending fibers. They travel down through the midbrain. they go down the brainstem, and then when they get to the medulla, they cross over, except they don't all cross over. So you can see some of them stay on the same side. Don't know why. I certainly don't know why. And everything that I've seen in the research, there's not a real lot of evidence to support a reason for it. So, hey, maybe you'll be the one to figure it out. We're going to finish up here with reflexes. And reflexes are a really important part of our anatomy because our environment is always changing. And one of the things that we have to be able to do is be able to react to it, and not react to it slowly, react to it quickly. And that's where our reflexes come in. So what are reflexes? Well, our spinal cord is our center for our reflexes. These are automatic subconscious responses. What that means is they happen without you thinking about it. They're subconscious, meaning you can't control them, and they respond to the environment. You've all gotten your reflexes checked. If you've ever gone to the doctor, one of the first things they do when they check you out is they have you sit on the table and they have that little reflex hammer and they give you a little tap on your tendon where your knee is, right? And your knee kicks out and you can't stop it from happening. So if you were able to do it right now, you could sit down, and if you sat there, you could hit your patellar tendon and your leg's going to kick out. And you can try to make yourself not do it. You can try to be like, no, don't kick, don't kick, don't kick. Well, guess what? You're still going to kick because your brain's not really part of that conversation. This is something that happens at the spinal cord level. So your spinal cord actually makes some decisions for you. Everybody thinks that your brain is what controls the show. Your brain controls most of the show, but some of the show is also controlled by your spinal cord. So our spinal cord has the ability to make things happen without our brain really even being involved. And that's why you can't control your reflexes. So these are going to control things like, for example, your heart rate, swallowing. Why do you automatically swallow when your mouth fills up with saliva? Your brain's keeping track of that. And when there's enough liquid in your mouth, this is kind of gross to talk about, but you automatically swallow. That is a response. Sneezing. When you sneeze, you can't control that. It just happens. It's a reaction to having, your receptors are triggered by something in your nasal cavity, which triggers you to sneeze. So these are all reflex actions that happen automatically. And basically what you have is something called a reflex arc. So I'm going to finish up today by talking about what a reflex arc is and how it works. But one of the best examples of a reflex is the patellar reflex. So your patella is your kneecap. And we have a scenario here. You can see, let me move my face. So we have a scenario here where you can see you have your leg. This is the leg right here. And you have two muscles. You have your main muscles. You have your quadriceps, which are going to be on the top, which cause your leg to kick out, and then you have your hamstrings, which cause your leg to pull inwards. And basically what we have is we have our patellar tendon, which the job of it is really to keep us standing up. Think about how long you stand up for during a day, during a normal day, not sitting in your house with COVID. And when you're standing there, when you're standing up, there's a lot of pressure pulling downwards, right? Gravity's pulling down. So why don't your legs just constantly give out? Well, the reason why is because when your leg bends a little bit, that sends a message to your spinal cord to straighten out your leg again, and that's what keeps you standing up. So this is the process which keeps you standing upright. It's because we have a constant little trigger that occurs that tells your muscle to stay contracted. So what ends up happening is your doctor hits, let's say this is your patellar tendon right here, which it is. It's not like I'm making that up. You hit that with the mallet, and what that does is it sends a sensory impulse through the sensory neuron to the spinal cord at that level. And then the spinal cord synapses directly with the motor neuron, and that immediately sends a message to your quadriceps to kick your leg out. So that way you don't fall over if you're standing up. The reason why that response happens so quickly is because it goes right from sensory to motor neuron. There's no stopping and thinking about it. It's an automatic response. So it only involves two neurons, the sensory and the motor. That is called a simple reflex. And the reason why it's called a simple reflex is because it only involves two neurons, the sensory neuron coming into the spinal cord and then the motor neuron coming out. And it happens immediately. Now, most reflexes, though, have 5 steps. So I'm going to finish up with this slide here and explaining what's going on. So this shows you another image. This is your spinal cord. So we have our white matter here. That's going to be your ascending and descending pathways. So this is basically, again, I want you to think of it like an elevator. The white matter is like an elevator going up and down. That's information going up and down. And then the gray matter, I know it's reversed in this image, but this white area here is actually the gray matter. That is going to be the information getting processed at that level. So it would be like if you got off at the floor of an elevator and you walked out to see what was going on that floor. That's what the gray matter is all about. It sends the information to and from the spinal cord. So we have a muscle here. We have our receptor, which is going to be in the tendon of the muscle. So that's going to send information through the sensory neuron to the gray matter, and then that's going to synapse with an interneuron. Now, these interneurons sometimes make a decision. There's going to be inhibitory and excitatory. So depending on the type of information coming in, this may inhibit or excite a motor neuron. And that is what determines whether or not that muscle is going to contract. So there's 5 stages, I guess you could say, to a reflex arc. That's called a reflex arc. There's always going to be a receptor. So the receptor is what's taking the information in. The receptor is either going to be in your skin, it's going to be in a tendon, it's going to be in a ligament. But the receptor is taking in sensory information. The receptor is going to be attached to a sensory nerve, which sends the information to the spinal cord. And then in the spinal cord, we're going to have our interneuron. That interneuron can exist in the spinal cord or it can be in the brain. Our brain is connected to our spinal cord, and it does have some impact on our reflexes, but most of our reflexes are dictated by the spinal cord. And then our interneuron is going to synapse with a motor neuron, which is then going to travel to a muscle or a gland, and that's going to make the effect, which is called an effector. So remember, cause and effect. The effector makes something happen. So the effector in this case is going to be a muscle, and that's going to contract. So here's some examples of some reflexes that you probably have heard of before. There's the withdrawal reflex. So when you touch something painful, you don't think about it. You automatically pull back. So for example, if I touch something hot, that is going to be the withdrawal reflex. Or if I step on something sharp, you automatically pick your foot up. It's not something you have to process. And the reason why you're able to do that is because of this reflex action. It happens at the spinal cord level. Your brain gets involved a little bit, but your spinal cord is really making it happen quickly and effectively to keep you safe. There's some other ones that, unfortunately, we would normally be doing a lab where we're getting to try this out. I have reflex hammers, but obviously that can't happen in this environment. But what we have here is we have the plantar reflex, something called the Babinski, which makes your feet curl up when you get tickled on the bottom of your feet, if you ever had that happen before. The biceps, the triceps, and the ankle jerk. These are all similar to the knee reflex. They keep your body upright. They keep your muscles upright. But that's all I have to say about reflexes. Thank you very much.